I had so much fun with this episode. This episode felt like the first proper adventure because our guys were quite literally stepping into uncharted territory. The stuff that we got this episode was probably the wildest stuff in both seasons so far, and I absolutely loved the vibes. I mean, we had a prehistoric tropical island with dinosaurs, giants, and a couple of psychos running around, so what's not to love? Another reason why this episode stood out is because we had so many one-on-one scenes between characters, so many heart-to-heart conversations, and that's kind of exactly what I asked for in my last review. I really hope that this episode wasn't the end of that and that we will continue mixing up the group and pairing up different characters. When a story has an ensemble cast, it's a bit disappointing that very often authors only explore a very limited number of dynamics within that ensemble. But from what I'm seeing in One Piece so far, this story isn't falling into that trap, and every main character forms some sort of specific connection with every other main character. But before I continue this discussion, a few quick things. If you're new here, then all you need to know is that I'm going into Season 2 blindly, other than the trailers. After Season 1, I have read the first 95 chapters of the manga, which is only the content already covered in Season 1, so while in my reviews I refer to the manga sometimes, it's not about any future events. Another quick reminder is please don't leave any spoilers in the comments without warning. Thank you. But going back to the discussion, let's start with the opening scene. What an impactful start to an episode this was. Miss All Sandy showed up out of nowhere, stole the show, and then just left just as quickly. First, how did she even jump off a ship when she shouldn't be able to swim thanks to a devil fruit? Was there someone or something waiting by the ship prepared for this dramatic departure, or perhaps her own powers have a levitation aspect to them, like maybe she flew away on her own petals or something like that? Obviously, if the scene was taken straight from the manga and it's explained there, then don't tell me because I will read the manga for myself after Season 2. But on a more serious note, this whole confrontation had so many interesting things. First, we find out that Miss All Sandy is Baroque Works' second in command, which probably means that she also knows the identity of Mr. Zero. Last episode I proposed this idea that maybe the whole code name situation is just a misdirection and Mr. Zero is actually a woman, or more specifically Miss All Sandy herself, but now I know that it's not true. But still, she intrigues me now even more than before because very often in stories, a villain's second in command is an even more interesting character than the main villain himself, so I'm very excited to see more of her. The next section I have will contain some spoilers through implications, so while I will try to be as vague as possible, but I still recommend skipping something like 10 seconds ahead for the live action onlys, like right now. So I loved the moment of Miss All Sandy putting the straw hat on top of her own hat. If you've seen my other reviews and you're familiar with the source material, then you already know the one spoiler that I already know about Miss All Sandy, so that was very cool foreshadowing. Okay, so the mild spoiler section is done and we can continue. We got introduced to the concept of an eternal pose, and I love it so much. I could see a situation in the future where an eternal pose is given as a goodbye gift or something like that, with the idea that no matter where or how far you go, you can always find your way back to that place. So that could be something really sweet. And just in general, these fictional devices are very interesting, and I love how we're getting different variations of it. I think we might get even more versions of a log post. For example, I could imagine a super well-developed version where instead of locking onto one specific island, a log post shows you all available options. So if you have a map, you can navigate the Grand Line easily. I mean, there are no rules with creating fictional technology. This specific Eternal post that Miss All Sunday gave us had something like Nanimona written on it. So I'm assuming it's the name of the island it was locked onto, and I wouldn't be surprised if at some point we actually do visit that island, only under different circumstances. But the most important question I have is, what is Miss All Sunday's angle? If the Straw Hats had accepted her offer, I just don't see what Baroque Works would have gained from that. What she told the Straw Hats felt like a personal offer and not an offer from Baroque Works. Other than that one specific spoiler that I have, I actually know nothing about Miss All Sunday or her past or her goals or her motives, and at this point in the story I have no good theories. In episode 1, during her talk with Tashigi, she implied that she used to be imprisoned in some way, but it seems that it was precisely Baroque Works that gave her freedom, that gave her wings, so at this point I don't see why she would be working against them. The only option I could see is, what if she went from one prison to another, only thinking it would be her freedom? But that's also assuming that she actually is working against Baroque Works right now. It's absolutely possible that offering the Straw Hats a way out was actually aligned with Mr. Zero's wishes. But this offer of mercy simply feels like it goes against what we've seen from Baroque Works thus far, so that's why I've been thinking about it so much. But it's time to move on to other characters. I think I'll start with Zoro and Sanji. I love their bickering in general, but their relationship this episode simply killed me. Some of my favorite moments include Zoro telling Sanji, "Don't lie to the lady," Zoro blaming Sanji for getting lost when, that's very rich coming from Mr. I have a great sense of direction, and also Sanji getting defensive about the differences between cooking and baking. Also, there was the whole argument about who killed the T-Rex, and to be fair, Sanji's kick was shown on screen first, so even if these two made their moves at the same time, my vote goes to Sanji. Zoro, my boy, I'm sorry, but you had your moment to shine last episode. On a side note, the fact that they killed a T-Rex is just wild. Imagine describing this episode to someone who isn't familiar with One Piece. It would sound like a fever dream and not a summary of a TV episode. Seeing that T-Rex go down was also very sad, but hey, our guys have to eat, so... Speaking about these boys individually, I loved Zoro's outfit, and especially his hat. That's it. That's the comment. And just in general, there are so many characters in One Piece with all kinds of headwear. Even if we look at this episode alone, we had Luffy, Zoro, Usopp, Miss All Sunday, Miss Golden Week, and Miss Valentine all wearing something unique. And even BROGY and Dory had helmets, which is also technically headwear. It's a very fun character design choice from Oda that you just don't see all too often in other stories. But going back to Sanji, I loved how he prepared lunchboxes for everyone, like it's a kids' school trip. And in general, I see preparing food for someone as an act of love. So I really love this aspect of Sanji, how loving he is, how caring, how kind, and how he expresses all that through feeding people, especially when he knows what hunger feels like. But other than some funny, cool, or sweet little moments, Sanji was mostly sidelined in the last couple of episodes, so I'm really waiting for his big emotional moment this season. Don't think I forgot that one shot from the trailer of him crying, so something big is probably coming, and that's why I can forgive if he doesn't get much to do at this point in the season. But next, let's move on to Vivi and Luffy. I loved all their scenes in this episode. First, I loved Vivi's kindness, how she was fully prepared to get to Alabasta alone so that she wouldn't put the Straw Hats in danger anymore. I also loved how she questioned Luffy's leadership with Nami, and Nami struggled to put her answer into words until she settled on saying, "When you see it, you see it." It's an obvious but effective setup for Vivi having her own moment like that. Throughout the episode, she was already warming up to some aspects of Luffy, but all she needs now is probably to see him save his crew in some unorthodox method. But even more importantly, to see the crew be inspired by Luffy and have their own heroic moments as they save each other. She needs to see how Luffy makes even the impossible thing possible and feel that inspiration about the future of her own country. Also, while I know that she's a princess and probably simply can't join the pirates, but at the moment Vivi definitely feels like a temporary, honorary member of the Straw Hats, so it's pretty cool how the story can do something familiar enough, but also still fundamentally different. Next, I loved Vivi and Luffy's adventures with the dinosaurs. First, it was so funny how Vivi was giving this grandiose speech about how special this island is, and then Luffy just interrupted her with, "I want to climb that." His name, Monkey D. Luffy, truly fits him perfectly. I also continue loving how much Luffy enjoys life itself. He was just drinking water from a fern and it was the most exciting thing to him ever. It's kind of like that classical advice about how instead of always running, always chasing something, you should try and look for happiness and joy in the things that you already have around yourself. It also ties to why Luffy isn't afraid to die and can just laugh in the face of death. It's precisely because he lives so fully every single second that he can look death in the eyes and see just another exciting step in life's journey. I also feel like I've seen very little from Luffy at this point. I definitely feel like Nami, where I know that I love him, but I can't really put it into words why, you know what I mean? But going back to the episode, I absolutely loved when Vivi asked Luffy, "How can you enjoy this?" when they were in so much danger. And that's another reason why One Piece as a story and Luffy as a character are so inspiring and so important. They show that it's precisely when things go bad that you should try and find things to enjoy. They encourage people to remember that all good things don't automatically go away just because bad things come. Another line I liked was Vivi telling Luffy, "I'm not a child." Despite how simple it is, it was a very sad line. She looks like the kind of person who would enjoy many things like Luffy if she didn't constantly feel the pressure of being a princess of a nation that's on the brink of war. I imagine that Vivi's character arc will include learning to embrace her inner child, learning to relax and enjoy things despite the challenges she has to go through. After all, even in this episode there was a moment where she smiled watching BROGY and Dory fight, so that's a good start. On a more fun note, it was funny how Luffy once again mispronounced something when he said Arrabbiata instead of Alabasta. And I also liked when Vivi mentioned her duck companion Karoo. I really hope we get to meet him, and it wasn't the kind of thing where his name was dropped, but due to technical constraints, we won't actually see him. On a similar note, if I had to guess, then this whole Alabasta arc is probably Season 3 stuff. Maybe we end Season 2 by getting there, or at the very least setting course in that direction. It was presented like a time-sensitive conflict, so I doubt that it can be dragged into any later seasons. It also looks like a much bigger conflict, because so far most arcs were wrapped up in no more than 2 episodes, but Alabasta is shaping up to be a much bigger set, so I'm curious to see something different, a change of pace of sorts, even if I fully enjoy the format that we have right now. The last Vivi-related thing I want to discuss is the ritual scene where she burned Igorum's handkerchief. It was a very beautiful and touching scene. Also, last episode I made a guess that Igorum may have gotten Mary's treatment, if you know what I'm referring to, but after this episode I'm beginning to seriously doubt that. But the most interesting thing to me in this scene was actually the focus on Luffy. There were a few moments when Vivi was blurred or even completely out of shot and the camera focused on Luffy. For example, during the part where Vivi spoke about Igorum being like her second father. I feel like this season just keeps planting all these tiny breadcrumbs about Luffy's origins. It also could be that the camera work this episode was the way it was purely to avoid that scene feeling static, but I doubt that. I feel like those moments of when to focus on Luffy had to be chosen very purposefully. But it's time to move on to Nami and Usopp. I loved how Nami noticed that Usopp went back to the ship and then she went after him. Their talk was super sweet. If I'm not mistaken, this is their second heart-to-heart conversation this season, and I absolutely love their relationship. Out of all the Straw Hats, these two feel like they have the most emotional maturity. This is a huge contrast to Season 1 and that one time when Zoro and Luffy attempted to have a heart-to-heart. Back then, Luffy said that he was fine. Zoro replied something along the lines of, "Okay, good talk," and that's it. So Usopp and Nami definitely stand out. I loved how Nami tried to inspire Usopp, and then later in the episode, Usopp threw her own words back at her. And also how determined Usopp was to save Nami at the end, especially after all the bonding they did. On a sillier note, I absolutely adored Usopp's impression of Miss All Sunday and her good luck. It was just a perfect moment. I also adored the story he told BROGY, and especially how he lowered his voice. And just in general, the actor Jacob is doing a fantastic job playing Usopp, even including his body language and how Usopp always stands. I also think that this episode was Usopp's episode, just like last episode was Zoro's episode. To be fair, it was more of a setup than Usopp actually doing something physically, but the emotional stuff that we got from him here was fantastic. Usopp reached some very important realizations. I absolutely adored his question, how do you face death without fear? Usopp is a warrior at heart, but he's also human, and it's only natural for people to be scared. But I feel like this episode he got closer to the mindset that someone like Luffy already has, how it's not about the fear of death, but about the joy of life. I also love how he was inspired by the giants and the stories of Elbaf. It's so cool and also very important to be passionate about something in life, to have something that can push you forward, no matter what it is, and it feels like Usopp finally found his own thing. His vague dream of becoming a brave warrior of the sea now has a much more solid shape. We're also 100% going to Elbaf at some point, and it would have been obvious even without Luffy making a promise to go there. So basically, I loved Usopp's inner conflict, I loved his progress, and I'm excited to see what he does next. And I think we can move on to BROGY and Dory. First, BROGY isn't dead. I refuse to accept it. I also remember the trailers had a shot of him that we didn't see yet, so he is fine. I have no idea how, but he's fine. Maybe someone has a way to heal him, or maybe the stab didn't actually get anything vital and BROGY is just napping, but he's fine. I also don't know how to feel about Mr. Five. On one hand, I hate him for messing with BROGY. But on the other hand, I liked his personality this episode a lot. He was very funny, like refusing to take off his coat because it's a style choice, or how he flipped Luffy the bird. I also adored when he said, "I'm sweating bullets here," because in Mr. Five's case, this idiom is actually very much literal. And since I already started talking about Baroque works, let's quickly go through the rest of them too. Mr. Free looks like a total psycho and I love it. This performance is something that's hard to look away from. It also seems that the closer your Baroque works number gets to 0, the stronger you are, but also the more aura you have, and so far that's been absolutely accurate. Miss Golden Week is creepy, as she should be. It's also cool how Miss Golden Week and Mr. Free are paired up, and they are both artists. As for her powers, my guess is that she can reverse people's personalities. Luffy, someone who never gives up, said, "What's the point?" after being affected by the paint. Zoro, someone who aims to be the world's greatest swordsman, was fighting pomegranates and calling them very strong opponents, not to mention the uncontrollable laughter. Nami, the mother of the group, someone who always has a plan, just wanted to pet a cloud cat. So personality reversal is my current best theory. But let's go back to BROGY and Dory. I guess this episode confirmed one of my guesses I made in my pre-season 2 discussion how One Piece might explore Norse mythology. They literally mentioned a big tree that's in Elbaf, which sounds like the world tree. Their concept of heroic death is obviously inspired by Valhalla. They were very good hosts to our crew, and hospitality is sacred in Norse mythology. And they even cheered by saying Skål, so you kind of can't get any more obvious than that. They also mentioned a sun god Nika, and I am wondering if the gods in One Piece universe are just a religion and nothing more, or are they actually real beings? At this point, nothing would surprise me. if we can get dinosaurs, then we can get gods too. We also find out that BROGY and Dory were pirates, and if I had to guess, I think they both were on the same crew and had a disagreement that started this whole century-long conflict. I also want to highlight the focus on Luffy and Usopp as the giants fought. Maybe I am overanalyzing things again, but it almost felt like foreshadowing that these two might fight too. If I remember correctly, when I did my manga reviews, I think I even mentioned it once how it would be interesting to see Luffy have a genuinely serious disagreements with one of the Straw Hats. But if none of that ends up being true, then at the very least I found it very cute how Luffy and Usopp were sharing their excitement about the giants. And one last tiny note I have is about the filming angles. There were so many shots where the giants were filmed from a lower camera angle. It's funny because on one hand, this is a valid trick to make an object seem bigger, but on the other hand, it probably also allowed the team to save some time and money on special effects. There's nothing wrong with that, don't get me wrong, but it's just fun to think about the behind the scenes. And besides, the special effects in One Piece are phenomenal, so it's completely fine to sometimes choose an easier route. And that's all I have about episode 4. I am so excited to continue this Little Garden arc and see what our characters do and what they learn. I'm also a bit sad that I already finished half of the season, but it's fine because I still have the manga and season 3 should come out relatively soon too. But thank you for listening if you're still here. Please share what you think in the comments. If you're interested, you can subscribe, and hopefully I will see you again for the discussion about episode 5.